Black history in the Barrens. I want you to think of our local history as a picture puzzle with thousands of pieces, each one representing the stories of local citizens and events. It's the purpose of the Cultural Center to collect, preserve, and share every piece of that puzzle so the Cultural Center can present the most complete history of life in the Barrens region to our visitors, to our local community, and to our visitors who also come from around the United States. In addition, our goal is that this history will be here for generations. In 2015, we organized a general exhibit of Black history in the Barrens. Used what we had because those were the only pieces of the puzzle that we had. And then in 2016, we focused on education. With the Bunch School Roundtable, we learned about the Rosenwald schools of the early 1900s, late 1800s, the hard work and generosity of Stephen Landrum, who donated the land for the training school, and the experiences and lifelong lessons of those who attended Bunch School. In 2017, our focus was African American women in the Barrens, and we learned about mothers and grandmothers, skilled teachers, healers, social workers, cafeteria workers, Sunday school teachers, and the contributions of the first Black female pilot and airplane mechanic, Willa Brown Chappell. She was instrumental in training World War II pilots and in desegregating the military at that time. This year, in 2018, we're highlighting those who served in the military. Each year, the Cultural Center has been able to add a little more in terms of photos and stories about people from our community. And each year, our history shows us that it is the ordinary citizen who has the power to do extraordinary things that benefit so many. I know that quote will ring true for today's speakers and for those who have been highlighted in our Black history in the Barrens exhibit on the second floor. Please take time today to go up to the second floor and see that exhibit. Before I introduce our speakers, I would like to thank all of you who made our exhibit and this special program possible. Joe Trigg, Donzel Moody, Alonzo Webb, Arius Crenshaw, William Twyman, June Jackson, Marvin and Sandy Claywell, Marsha Latira, Charles Allen, the family of Bobby, Alexander, and Shed Elliott, Winston Bailey, Rodney Trigg, and then those who have helped us get the word out. WCLU is always our biggest cheerleader. The Glasgow EPB, this is being filmed today and will appear on our Glasgow EPB station. I don't have the times at this point, but I can email those to you if you get us your email addresses. The Glasgow Daily Times printed an article yesterday, and the writer of that article, Gina Kinslow, told me later that that article has been picked up by the Associated Press, which means it will go Barren County Progress, WNKY, the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. All those entities are important to thank. Today, I'm pleased to introduce two distinguished speakers. They're going to share about early military history and about their history in the military. Lieutenant Colonel Donzel Moody, now retired, was born in rural Mississippi, earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Communications, with a minor in military science. At graduation, he was commissioned as second lieutenant and served 22 years in the Army. His military service focused on training and mobilization readiness. He is the recipient of 2 Meritorious Service Medals, 2 Army Commendation Medals, the Army Service Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, and the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. He currently resides in Bowling Green and is the Vice President of the Bowling Green Warren County chapter of the NAACP. He's married and has 2 teenage sons, and he notes that his father was a mentor in his life. Carol Moody was a decorated Korean War veteran. Our second speaker, a Glasgow native, also retired, as Chief Master Sergeant Joe Trigg. Joe earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science and served in the Air Force from 1978 to 2007. He completed numerous assignments and deployments worldwide and is the recipient of multiple military decorations. I don't think there's a page long enough to list those. And in 2002, he earned the highest enlisted rank of Chief Master Sergeant. The uniforms in the exhibit upstairs are courtesy of Joe Trigg. He served on the United States Secret Service Very Important Personnel Protective Support Agency missions for 5 different U.S. presidents. He was instrumental in forming Farmers to City Connection, a small farmers network to feed Louisville's low-income families with produce from local small farmers. He has served on the Glasgow City Council and has been a board member of the Cultural Center. Each of these distinguished military officers will share about Black history in the military, from early times to their military experiences that they had for a period of time, 20 to 30 minutes, something like that, maybe a little bit longer. Each then will field any questions you might have after both presented their story. We'll start today with our Bowling Green guest, retired Lieutenant Colonel Donzel Moody.
I'd like to say good afternoon to everyone. What an honor it is to be here today to share a few minutes with you. And I can promise one thing, I won't make you happy twice. Happy to see you come and happy to see you go. I promise you. Now, it's going to appear like Joe and I got together and the way my presentation would lead into his, but we did not. It worked out, after talking with him, it worked out as me being pretty much a prelude to his presentation. A little bit about myself. First of all, how many veterans are in the building? The show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Good. A little bit about myself. As my bio said, I'm from a little rural area in Mississippi, and I know I'm a long ways from home. From McLean, Mississippi to Glasgow, Kentucky. I retired from the military, but a little bit about my getting into the military. And as you'll see, my father is on one of these slides when I get to the Korean War slide. I grew up in a family of 18 children. And that's another story in itself. Don't ask any questions about that right now. That'll take another day. Yeah, and by the way, it was one mom and one dad. Okay, so if you're wondering that, it was. But anyway, every time I say that, I refrain from letting it out sometimes because people are like, oh, they're in this stare mode. Really? Yes. My dad was the Korean War, and growing up, all I ever heard was the war. Army. Yeah, you know, it was 9 boys and 9 girls. And he was such the disciplinarian. So much until you would think he was a retired, I don't know, drill sergeant or whatever. But I got that discipline and that instilled in me early on. And he is, and I told him before he passed away, he's the one that got me into this military thing. It was in my head so much. So when I got to University of Southern Mississippi, and a lot of people, a lot of veterans have those patriotic stories where they tell you how they got into the military because of patriotic reasons, da, da, da. I wish mine was that, but it's not. Okay, so I was sitting in the cafeteria one day. I was a junior in college at the time, and every Wednesday these guys, you know, the Army guys, ROTC guys would wear their uniform on Wednesday, and Thursday the Air Force guys would wear theirs. So I asked the Army guy one day, the cadets, I said, man, what? Y'all get paid for that? You know, here I am, I'm a poor kid now, I'm from rural Mississippi. And he said, yeah, man, we get $100 a month. I'm like, what? You serious? And he said, yeah. I said, when do you get paid? He said, every next month. He didn't tell me if I had to sign a contract for 8 years. You know? All that came later on. That came later on. So, you know, when I got there, you know, they said, okay, well, I said, I'll try it out. You know. So it went from there. So that's where my involvement in the military got, and it went on from there. Now, what I'll do today, I want to take you through a few slides, and I appropriately named this slide, We Were There, to show you the African American contribution to the military through all the wars. And the reason I say that as a prelude to what Joe Triggs is going to say, he's going to get more, I think, more in depth into that. But how many can recognize this picture, these soldiers? See here. All right. So see here. Oh, great. Good. From the very beginning, it's everybody familiar with Crispus Attucks? Well, he's said to be the first casualty, American casualty of the Revolutionary War, and we all know what that war was about. I won't get into a lot, but again, just to go through some of these. Have we heard of Charles Ball? See, blacks served on both sides during the War of 1812, and that's one of the things I want to point out. And if we get to the next slide here, which I think is going to be the Civil War. On the left, the Union, and on the right, the Confederate. Now, the story about the black Confederates serving under that banner. Well, you know, a lot of we know the stories. We dig into the history. A lot of them wasn't voluntarily serving under the Confederate. You know, they were still owned by some of the masters there. But at the same token, it's to show that they were on both sides. Yeah. The Indian campaign. How many have not heard of the Buffalo Soldiers? Right. I think everybody knows about the Buffalo Soldiers. I served and retired at Fort Riley, Kansas, and I know quite a bit about the Buffalo Soldiers. In fact, I was in school at Fort Leavenworth during the time that Colin Powell unveiled the Buffalo Soldier Monument. And you'll notice some of the guys in here, if you look closely, even have the Buffalo jacket on. And again, with the theme of We Were There, the Spanish-American War, 1898. You know, one of the things I want to note about serving in African Americans serving in the military, it's not, and it's about, let me back up. Let's talk about just a minute about black history in general for a minute. Black history is looking back and seeing where we come from in order to have a better view of where we're going. That's what it is to me. Now, I tell people all the time about the military. Now, don't think that just back in these days, oh, there had to be discrimination, there had to be prejudice. Well, it still goes on. I'm here to tell you. And I'm sure Joe will have some story. Back in as an example, in 1985, I had a guy at Southern Miss, a white major. He called me into his office. And I didn't know what it was about. And they said, Major Carson wants to see you. And I said, well, anytime you had to go to Major Carson's office, it wasn't good. So he had my contract ready for me to get out of the Army. He said, you sign here, I'll let you out. He said, you are not fit to be a military officer. And so I said, at this point, my old man began to talk in my head. Because all I could hear growing up, boy, don't ever quit. Boy, don't do this. We were raised on the farm. And there was cows, there was pigs, it was that farm life. It was that instilled in me. So when I got into the military, there were some things that people get when they get into the military, the discipline and all. Well, I already had that. I didn't need the military for that. So at that point, that clicked in, that training, and I could hear my dad saying, whatever you do, don't quit. Do not quit. And that's what I told the guy. I said, sir, if I don't make it, it won't be because I signed these papers. I'm going to drive forward. And I say that to say this, is sometimes under the conditions and the hardships that you go through when you succeed that makes it sweeter. And all of us can attest to that, not just in the military, but anywhere we go. World War I was a pinnacle of wars for African Americans. And the reason I say this, it was a time where pretty much the African Americans were fighting for respect. Okay, there was going on during the Great Migration. We read about the Great Migration when people left the South in droves and went north. Well, the blacks saw a way going out of poverty. It saw a way to say, hey, it's a way for me to prove myself. There's all this Jim Crow going on, and I'm going to get in here and prove, even though it was segregated, even though they couldn't go they couldn't go into the white mess hall, sit at the same tables and all, but they still succeeded. And here you're seeing some officers on the left side there, from World War I. And I didn't know, back when I was growing up as a young kid in rural Mississippi, there were several World War I vets in there. This was early, I guess I was 7, 8 years old, and I remember my dad telling me who the vets were. And it's good to have known that because the last living vet, I think, died in 2005, World War I, 2005 or something. Can everybody see that okay, or does it light? Okay? Okay. I didn't think you maybe turn the lights down. Oh,
that's better.
Yeah, great. So here's we just mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen. Now the story of the Tuskegee Airmen is there something upstairs on the Tuskegee Airmen on display maybe in the museum? Okay, I was just curious. Okay, yeah, I won't go there, and I'm not here to talk about, the extent of. I'm here basically to show the errors and the wars and the engagement and the level of participation that the African Americans were in. And again, these guys didn't just serve, gallantly, but under the conditions. This is what I need to understand. The conditions under which they had to do that. Okay, I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. Well, that wasn't like a lieutenant colonel here. You see what I'm saying? They had to go all the way. I had my share, but you can't compare to that. Here's some of the airmen, the Tuskegee Airmen, some of their accomplishments. And I tell you, if you don't know a whole lot about these guys, I encourage you to read up on it. It's interesting. It's very interesting to Tuskegee. Do we have anybody doing the Korean era? Yeah, sir. Yeah.
69.
69. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Mr. Robert E. Smith at Rockville had served 27 months in North Korea prison.
Is that right?
He's deceased now.
I've learned a lot about the Korean War, and again, through my father telling me the stories of these things. And when I was young, I didn't understand it. But it wasn't until I did his obituary that and went through his medical, his military records, that I found out some of the things. I'm like, whoa, But here again, we were still, and I think the Korean War was the first war where it began to integrate without a desegregated unit, although it was still going on just like the Civil Rights Act. It may have said, hey, no more discrimination, but in Alabama, Mississippi, they were late in coming aboard. The Korean War was the same way. That's my dad. That's the picture he showed me a lot, and he's a guy that he was 21 years old when he went in, and he was drafted. And I asked him one time, I said, Dad, how was your service, and to leave home, were you glad? He said, son, I was nervous. He said, but I was ready to get away from my daddy. He said it could be, and his word was, I didn't know what could be worse. So let me go over here and fight. At least I have some, something to fight with. But he came to really rough childhood, as a lot of people his age did. But with the 24th Infantry Division, the Vietnam War. In the Vietnam eras, you guys were, I know. Joe, were you doing that era? No, you're 7 and 8. Yeah, okay. Well, okay, good, okay. Yeah. This is a Marine, and you'll see here, I think right here, the first, let's see if I can see it here. You probably won't be able to see this here. This guy, and the reason I put his picture up there, he was the first African American to receive a Medal of Honor. Threw himself on a grenade and hovered it with in his chest when the grenade was thrown into his platoon area, and he just jumped on it and covered it with his chest. And that got him the first Medal of Honor, the African American. And I thought I would highlight him because I think it was worth highlighting. And we get down toward the latter parts. And everybody remember the Persian Gulf War. I was a second lieutenant in 1990. Just minding my business, got to call, meet at the mobilization station. I was down in Harrisburg, Mississippi, Camp Shelby. You guys probably never heard of Camp Shelby. Have anybody heard of Camp Shelby? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, good. Most people out there don't know about Camp Shelby, but if you go there, you don't forget it. You don't forget that either the humidity, the mosquitoes, or the rattlesnakes, there's stories down at Camp Shelby. Got called up for that, and we all know the rest of the story. They found it, and I remember a bunch of officers being out eating in a restaurant one night. We got the word that they just lit up back there, and the Air Force just came in and swapped, and you guys understand that. So I didn't go. But it was good to see 4th of July on the TV there in Baghdad. And then we get down to the global war on terror, which includes the Afghan war or the war in Iraq. And as a result of 9/11, George Bush, he began to call this the global war on terrorism. Here's in my closing, I want to say this, and I teach my kids the same thing, and because we are in a time now, you know, and it's been said that race tension sometimes is as high as it was back during Jim Crow, and I get to thinking, I hear a lot of grown-up talking a lot, but I think the main thing I need to prepare my kids, how do you face these things? Because it's what shaped me growing up. My father taught me, see, I grew up in the early 60s down in South Mississippi, and, you know, all of that. You can't change the past, but I love talking to young people and preparing them for future things and what we're about to face. The military, in my opinion, has done more for me than college, than whatever. It really has. It was a perfect transition from leaving Harold Moody to go to the next thing, because he prepared me. And again, you know, I thing that I like the most, he knew it before he passed away, because I told him all the time. You know, he was there to pin on my second lieutenant bar. He was there as every promotion, you see. So that's all I have. But again, the contributions that the African American made go way back. And even if we look even further, if we search even further back before the Revolutionary War, we'll still find the contribution of African Americans there. Is there any, well, we're going to do the question thing after this. I was just going to answer if there any. Okay. Well, that is all I have. I think that's my last slide, but I appreciate it.
Now, he's in the restaurant.
You went to the restaurant? Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, look, and I'm looking forward to Joe, and I didn't know Joe until Alonzo told me about him, but I'm looking forward. In fact, I don't know. I'm gonna ask you. Keesler Air Force Base down in Biloxi, Mississippi. Have y'all ever been there?
No, he wasn't stationed there.
He wasn't stationed.
He's probably been there.
Probably been there for some training or something. Yeah. I frequent Keesler a lot. I take my kids there a lot, trying to get some military in them, but they never jumped on them. I was taking them to military bases and everything. I was hoping the military buzz would jump on them, but I think I wanted more than they wanted. Felt like my dad was talking about it so much. I think I talked about it too much, and it turned them against it. But anyway, I appreciate you guys' time, and I just want you to know that I appreciate you guys allowing me to come in to talk a few minutes. And my experience in the military really has shaped me. I have been through some things, you know, that I could go on and on about. Don't ever think that just because it's the military, that big structure, that it's not prejudice and bias and race. You know, it abounds in there. Hundreds of stories I can share with you. But anyway, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
I'd like to say thanks to the Culture Center for sharing. You guys have helped us a lot during Black History Month over the last few years. And I want to really say thank you for what you've done and hope that you continue. My little presentation will be a little bit longer. And I was asked to talk about 30 years of military, and it will take me a moment or two to truly get started into, because if you look at history, we only started truly fighting war maybe in the 90s. But over the last 20 years, we've been knee deep into it.
I can relate to what he's saying about being hard on your children about being in the military. My son's here, he'll tell you, and the rest of my family will tell you, and all his friends in school will tell you that I'm adamant about young men entering the military. I think it should be mandatory service for every American youth, male, female, handicapped, or whatever. I think everyone should serve, and then the appreciation would be different than what we see now. Now, I hope the EPB doesn't share that part on TV for political sake, because of course I won't ever get elected to another office again. I can put everybody's kids in the military. Whenever I speak, I normally ask the audience for a little participation, both mentally and physically. And we use the concept of yin and yang in my approach here today. The concept of yin and yang is used to describe how seemingly opposite or contrary forces are interconnected and interdependent in the natural world. What could be more yin and yang than the history of the Black military family? Earlier this week, WCLU did an interview with me, and they were asking me some questions, and I felt that there was some historical information that folks needed to have. He's already given you part of it, and I told them that I would give you a few stats on what the military veteran has done. History shows that blacks have served in all wars, to include black units in the Civil War, Buffalo soldiers on the Western frontier, black units during the Spanish-American War. But no single action had more effect on the demographics of the U.S. military than the introduction of the draft in 1940. This led to over 1 million blacks being drafted for World War I. Now the slide showed 300,000 served, but 1 million blacks were drafted for World War I. Over 900,000 blacks were drafted in World War II. Now, a larger percentage of those served. 13% of the 1.6 million folks that served in Korea were black. So you're looking at 300,000 plus of the folks that served in Korea were black soldiers. The Vietnam War covered a period from 1950 through 1975. During the time frame of 1961 through 1967, we saw the largest increase of black participation in this war, mainly due to the draft. Blacks who made up barely 11% of the population now accounted for 18% of all draftees, 23% of all combat troops, and more unfortunately, 25% of all combat deaths. As a young kid growing up during this time frame, a few years deep into integration of the local schools, we were unfortunately aware of the glaring fact that if you were black in Glasgow, you were destined for the military. By the time I graduated in 1976, even though the draft had ended, you knew something drastic institutionally had happened. For the number of kids walking the streets, playing basketball at the Ralph Bunche School was void of young men over 18, and all of the local churches and most families had their share of military families. Let me fast forward these numbers to 1980. This is when blacks made up the largest part of the Army, which was about 25%, and the numbers started going down. In 1991, 15% of all combat troops in Iraq were black. In 2015, 17% of the U.S. military is currently black, and 12% is Hispanic. So as we talk today about war, almost 30% of the U.S. military is white. The common saying after the end of the war, or the end of the draft, was even more so now, is because many minorities don't have the traditional advancement opportunities, good schools, good families, college funds, knowing the right people, that it makes sense that so many would turn
to the military for a leg up. Speaking for myself, and speaking for him, the military did give me an opportunity for a leg up. There are 5 sayings or quotes that have helped me while serving in the military that I need to get you to think about doing this presentation that I'm doing. And I was in the military, a pretty hardcore guy. Chief Master Sergeant E9, you're kind of crusty. So if I say something, then hopefully I won't say anything that's too difficult. The first one of those quotes is, the winner writes the history book. Whoever wins the war, they get to write what's in there. If you don't win, your story don't get told. The difference between right and wrong, or between white and black, is this gray area in the military. And the military is full of gray. We don't know what we don't know, and we really don't want to know. And that is our involvement in wars around this world. There are 6 P's that I say to myself and to my son. Piss poor preparation leads to piss poor performance. And in war, that means death.
Amen.
And finally, based like Forrest Gump said, shit happens. I grew up here in Glasgow, down on the lower end of Bush Street, deep in the kingdom. And to say we were a little poor is an understatement. The only good thing about it, everybody else was in the same boat, so it didn't seem to bother us, and we all seemed to have hope. I graduated in 1979 from Glasgow High School, then briefly attended Purdue University, where I was in Air Force ROTC and a Greek fraternity. All of these activities directly contributed to how I ended up in the Air Force. In 1978, I joined the Air Force, started basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. Afterwards, went on to Redstone Arsenal for chemical training, and then on to Indian Head Naval Center, where we had nukes and other explosive training. The job I was being trained for was EOD, Explosives Ordnance Disposal, which was a joint service training program. My first duty assignment was from 1979 through 1982 at Edwards Air Force Base, California. This is where I had my first exposure in the Mojave Desert. I can remember waking up on my first day and walking to a nearby desert hilltop. You could see nothing but desert and dry lake beds for miles, and way off in the distance you could see the mountains. I sat down on that hill and maybe even cried. Lord, what did I do to deserve this? I knew I'd messed up in school, and maybe this desert fire was what I needed to straighten me out. But I thought I was actually going to party in LA. Edwards was a key military test base, so a majority of its operations were considered special. We were so special, our flight was one of the few units authorized to wear the old slanted pockets, Vietnam jungle fatigues. And I was able to find a shirt that I gave to her, but it's in bad shape and it's not on display. I was immediately exposed to just about every aircraft system in the U.S. and other countries' militaries. And here, doing missile support, I got my first experience in helicopter operations, mountain, desert, and ocean environments. We wanted 2 units qualified in various aspects of the NASA Space Shuttle program and had accomplished those test operations for the proposed separate Air Force Shuttle program in Vandenberg that did not come to bear. We were one of the first units selected to provide explosive support to the United States Secret Service VIPSA program, and we were then slated to cover President Carter and President Reagan. I was a key member of a basketball team that won the 1980 Air Force runner-up and 1981 Air Force championships. But unfortunately, I was a prodigal son, and I had to try college again. I had been attending college at night and felt I was better prepared now to be there. What I hadn't experienced was being truly poor in college. No free ride, no scholarships, and minimal financial aid. 1 year of food stamps and working more than going to school made the Air Force look a hell of a lot better. I asked the Air Force if I could re-enlist. They took me back in almost 24 hours. From 1983 through 1989 saw my return to Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. As a prodigal son, I know now that I deserve being sent to the other side of the same Mojave Desert that I had just left a year ago. Dallas was another key missile test base where emphasis were on gunnery and bombing operations. We directly supported F-15 and F-16 fighter aircraft flying in conjunction with different bombers against foreign adversary aircraft was the normal workload. An enormous desert bombing range that takes up a lion's share of the state of Nevada was to become my playground. Over half of my 6 years was spent doing bi-weekly range classes. At one point, we had our own little rat patrol using MB series Jeeps before we moved up to M80 series vehicles and Humvees. We destroyed millions of tons of ordnance, and I discovered a lot of our ordnance just plain dumb. I helped initiate short-term desert insertion procedures, which would later spearhead Air Force survival and recovery operations in that environment. We tested and helped the Air Force in the transition of sniper weapons from the M14 to the M82 American sniper caliber rifle, which was used for remote large and small caliber ordnance clearance operations. It was there that I was starting to be recognized as a nuke hero, setting new standards for nuclear qualifications and team operations. With the unexpected expansion of the VIPSA program, Air Force units were now being tasked more often by the U.S. Secret Service for support to Presidents Reagan and President Bush. And a lot of that was based on the Air Force showed a different mentality in civilian clothes doing civilian stuff. Little did I know that both of these assignments would lay the framework for everything that I was to be known for later in the Air Force. And that was to be known for doing an outstanding job. There's so many pages here, I thought I missed one. I hope I'm getting there. Come on in. Because it'll mess us up a little bit. My first combat action happened between 1989 and 1991 at Howard Air Force Base in Nevada. Real war is not what you see on TV. And for the first time, I started seeing the gray areas of war. For the Korean and Vietnam veterans here in this room, you can understand what I'm about to say. Visualize Panama City, estimated population of about 1 million, skyscrapers surrounded by shantytown buildings. And all of this was under the direct assault by AC-130 gunships and the blunt force of the U.S. military. As a part of Operation Just Cause, I was the team chief for 103 emergency response and special ops missions. Although in a jungle, lessons learned at Edwards and Nellis played an important role in my survival. Immediately after the war officially ended, it was back to basics, and our team was slated as the lead Air Force EOD Secret Service support team for Central and South America. And for all the vets here, you know what I'm about to say. War is never over when we say it's over. We might think the war is over, but the folks that was living there, they were still ready to fight. In early 1991, I returned to the U.S. and arrived at Scott Air Force Base to help start a new EOD flight. In April 1991, I was deployed in support of Desert Storm and Shield to Daharan Air Force Base, Saudi Arabia. We used to laugh as a small group, saying all of the brothers in EOD were there at the same time. Imagine. Hell, there were even brothers there that we didn't even know existed. While I was there, I was selected as a nominee for the UN Special Commission's Nuclear Search Weapons team, based on my past experience. It was the first time the being black was an issue. For none of the blacks that were selected or nominated were eventually selected to be on the team that went to search for us. In 1992, when I returned back to Scott, we started conducting the initial training and build-up for Operation Restore Hope, which was Somalia. December the 1st, I deployed to the headquarters unit and tasked the initial response teams with the operation ending prior to my arrival in Somalia. Because Somalia was turning a lot into another Vietnam. It was not about to be involved in trying to help a black country. In conjunction with all this, I served as an Air Force team chief for the U.S. Secret Service support during that presidential election cycle. I was initially assigned to protect Jesse Jackson's campaign team. And then after he lost in the primary, I was later assigned to candidate to be President Clinton's support. Between 1993 and 96, I was reassigned to RAF Lakenheath. While I was there, we were recognized as the top EOD flight in the Air Force, with an unheard number of 1,526 manned TDY days to various operations. Somehow or another, I had over 500 of those TDY days. In 1994, I deployed back to Operation Desert Shield, Dhahran Air Force Base, again in Saudi Arabia. I was a team chief for 12 special operations missions from Kuwait into Iraq. I was a team chief for the EOD Secret Service support to the Mideast talks that they had in Amman, Jordan. I was also a team chief support for embassy support at the United Arab Emirates, or the embassy at the United Arab Emirates. I returned back to England, and in 1996, I deployed for Operation Joint Endeavor, which was to Tuzla Air Force Base, Bosnia. As a team chief, I conducted over 200 operations and 7 Special Forces missions throughout Bosnia, Serbia, and Croatia. It was suspected that in at least one of those countries, I was the only black third at that time, and I called it. I served as a team chief for divers miss an international nuclear weapons accident and recovery exercise. And then based on that, on my actions there, I was selected to be a NATO TAC evaluator. Our unit continued to do VIPSA Secret Service, and we were the primary support team for operations throughout Europe and Africa. So I got an opportunity to visit at least 5 or 6 countries in Africa. Most important thing that happened to me while I was at RAF Lakenheath was I met and married my wife. Absolutely. So I had to throw that in there so I could go home.
Thank you.
Between 1996 and 2000, I was stationed at Marshall Air Force Base in Louisiana, where I led the acclaimed Go-To Air Force EOD unit with over 5,000 TNY mandates. In support of B-52 and A-10 aircraft systems, we were recognized as the runner-up top EOD flight in the Air Force. I deployed again in 1998 for Operation Desert Shield to United Arab Emirates, where I provided both base and embassy support in an Arab nation. So based on the actions that's happened in other embassies, you don't know what you don't know, and you really don't want to know. In 1999, I deployed an Operation Allied Force. We saw our B-52s being deployed to England in support of Kosovo. Like Somalia, rank has its privileges, and by the time I was slated to go, this war was over, but the team I had trained performed outstanding. Again, our unit was performing as VIPSA's USS Secret Service primary support team for operations through another election cycle, and eventually President Bush II was selected. In September, my son Joe, he was born. Less than a year later, while he was still a baby, between 2001 and 2003, I was reassigned to Insulet Air Force Base, Turkey. We were in processing the base on September 11th when they struck the Twin Towers. Ironically, I had been in New York a few days prior to be briefed on VIP submissions at my new assignments. 2001 saw Operations Northern Watch and Enduring Freedom. Hell, not only am I there before it starts, but now my family is there too. In 2003, Operation Iraqi Freedom started. This was the second Persian Gulf War. And fortunately, my family was evacuated back to England. I was recognized as the enlisted commander of all EOD operations in Turkey. And what that meant was there was a bit of a dispute. And if you look at the maps, you'll see the borders between Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran are dotted lines. Even more important, our ops center was the command post for just about all non-flying operations for the first few weeks. The Navy and the Army loved it. The Air Force was starting to hate it. My role as a VIPSA team leader expanded as team chiefs for peace talks. My role as a VIPSA team leader expanded. I was selected as a team chief for the peace talks in Switzerland for President Bush's push to Mid-Eastern Europe. As a result of these actions, the incident flight that I was assigned to was recognized twice as USAFE's EOD top flight, and once we were the second run-up flight in the Air Force. I know you're probably saying right now, when does it end? But bear with me, for we're getting close. Between 2003 and 2007, I was reassigned at Scott Air Force Base to headquarters AMC. 2004 saw my return to Operation Iraqi Freedom at Baghdad International Airport. As a flight chief, I coordinated over 245 emergency response operations, personally led teams on 45 incidents, and my first Bronze Star was down. 2006 saw another return to Operation Iraqi Freedom at the Combined Joint Task Force base Troy at Baghdad, Iraq, as the Air Force Senior Enlisted Advisor for all Iraqi EOD operations. Sometimes my advice was taken the wrong way. My second Bronze Star was down. Touted by the U.S. as the Air Force go-to command, we coordinated about 1,800 flawless missions in support of the Secret Service. And my last Secret Service mission was to support the Queen of England during a visit to the Kentucky Derby.
That's the best one.
It was kind of recommended to me that I retire in 2007 after my point-blank trip report was released to a lot of 3- and 4-star generals about my view of force status in Iraq. I guess the guy sitting on the throne was upset for me telling them they didn't have no draws on me. A couple of years ago, on a trip back to the Pentagon, we laughed about how that same report keeps coming up, and it was agreed. It was now about 99.98% correct of what was to happen during the Middle East. I hope that the other 2% doesn't come true. If so, little Joe will be deployed there to start this mess all over again. I retired in 2007 after a career that took me to almost 54 countries, and I hope I positively affected someone each of those places. In the beginning, little did I understand or appreciate the basic freedoms we take for granted. In the beginning, little did I understand how much Black veterans have contributed to our Air Force, our military. Excuse me. Not much has changed in 2018 as we listen to the tat-tat-tat of war drums with the military close to 30% white. What could be more yin and yang than the future of the Black veteran in the U.S. military? I can laugh now, looking back on it and say, my career It's a lot like Tom Hanks in the movie Forrest Gump. Life is a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. I hope you have a chance to look at the exhibits here today. I'd like to thank the Goodyear Cultural Center for your support to military black kids. Thank you.
What I'd like to do now is open it up for questions. I think what we've heard from both of these gentlemen, the quote that I used at the very beginning has rung true. History shows us that it is the ordinary citizen who has the power to do extraordinary things that benefit so many. I think that rings true here today. I have a small token of thanks for each of our speakers, and would like each speaker to come up and field any questions that there might be. Thank you both for your service. Thank you. Appreciate you coming and talking to us today. Joe, thank you very much. Are there questions for our speakers?
Yes, I definitely got that question. Both of y'all done an excellent job. Great, y'all understand the emotion. I have questions about, I know that Harriet Tubman, before the Lord served as women military. Would y'all speak on about advancement of women? Because I know Harriet Tubman served in the military as a spy, soldier, tough soldier. Military break through the barrier in the military.
Well, I'll say briefly, and if you guys heard him, he mentioned about women in the military, and I guess the transformation and how it evolved over time. When I was in basic training in 1984, women were integrated in basic training. Okay, so yes, I have already grown up, heard, just all men, physical training and basic training, but it's one of the things that you come to understand, I think the same way as you come to understand blacks that are able to do a certain thing, that's able to perform on the same level of anybody if they're given the chance. I've served with women, some of the most, oh gosh, and I'll say this, one of my high school friends, she was 11th grade and I was 12th grade. We was in ROTC together, Southern Miss, got commissioned together. Last year I went to her retirement ceremony at Fort Knox. She was a one-star general, the deputy commander of a whole human resource command for the entire army. So yes, they have evolved.
And what I saw while I was in the service was, again, as you heard me say, I spent a lot of time with the Navy and the Army. We spent a lot of time in deployed locations. Probably the largest concentration of black females I saw was maybe at Tuzla-Pasa. In the desert, they're a large portion of it. If the military, a large percentage of the military is black, then the number of blacks serving is going to be larger. And if 50% of the population is women, then a lot more women are in the military now than you would be aware of. My job, it was maybe, we went from maybe 1 to 3% blacks. Now, there's only about 1,000 EOD guys. We got 1 or 3% black. There were no black women in EOD. One of the things that I did, which was pretty controversial, and my wife knows I've apologized for it, was we implemented procedures where women would serve in EOD. The Air Force said now the Army does have women in EOD, the Navy and the Marine Corps don't. Again, I don't know of any black females that have went through the EOD school, but there have been white females who have advanced through the school, and then there have been, and this is the sad part, there have been white females that have died in the military, at least in my job that I'm aware of, in other jobs within the service. So again, the Army had the largest percentage of black females, and I saw that large percentage mainly in deployed locations.
Speaking of, history and the Tuskegee Airmen, I think there was initial training of African Americans to be pilots. I don't know if you have this information or stats on it, but how many would you say African American, both male and female pilots, do we have in the military today?
I'll just speak probably straightforward. Once you get old and crusty like I am, a lot of times you're sitting in the meetings where they're making these decisions. And they would like for the military to represent the demographics of the U.S., which would make it about 13%. So normally, officers, which would be to fly, you had to be an officer, those numbers are a lot less. You're looking at maybe less than 7% officers for all of the enlisted that you have. 7% of the black are going to be officers, not 7% of the officers. The number of black officers is definitely a lot more. And pilots, after World War II and the reduction or the Tuskegee Airmen leading the way, that has went away.
Yes, and I'll say this, and that's an interesting question because it's going to prompt me to really dig deeper. But I'll say this, I as an officer, I sit in these high-level briefings, the bubs, the updates, and all branches of the Army are represented. The aviators, I'm a signal officer, the signal corps, the logisticians and all. You just don't see in blacks at the table in aviation. Now, it's very rare. Now, the reason behind that is,
You would think that, after starting Tuskegee Airmen and the training there, this would certainly progress, up until today, to have more African American pilots,
Mr. Hunter, I'll be honest, when I arrived back here, there used to be a guy that worked at the airport, and his name, he was a retired general. He was an astronaut for the SR-71. And himself and I, we were interested in, what I wanted to do was, we have an opportunity for a young man like my son and others to do something that is good. So we were trying to bring back an aspect of the Tuskegee Airmen program to Glasgow. It did not fall on good eyes. So the people in know, if you have an opportunity to say restrict or hold back, that's an avenue where that restriction can be applied. So the number of violence is going away. And yes, discrimination exists in the service. It exists everywhere. Most folks, I don't like somebody that's got more than me. That's probably everybody that's in here that's got more than me. We don't like each other. But the military still has an opportunity, offers an opportunity for advancement. But you have to be able, the concept is, he can speak to this. You have to, as a black military person, you have to give 110 or 150%. And your counterpart may be able to get away with 100. And that's just the nature of life. And so they would like for, if they wanted the military to match the demographics of the U.S., 13%. But then, if you look at the number of pilots that there are in the U.S., then you're probably looking at an extraordinary low number of blacks that they want, that will have opportunities.
What kind of future is it for, I've noticed, I don't know a lot about the military personally, but watching TV and seeing what's going on. I'm kind of a military historian, I want to know about what happened, even going back, to the early times with the wars. But would it be an opportunity today for, say, computer analysts
for, to operate drones. I see a lot of that happening now, with the war. And I would think that would be a great area for someone to look at as far as training.
And inadvertently, in some of the different things I was involved in, there were remote operations. More than likely, I'm pretty sure I've seen them. There were drone pictures of myself in certain places. The drone program that's run out of Dallas or Indian Springs, I shouldn't say this, but Indian Springs, Nevada is where the Air Force currently do it. So the emphasis on what you're talking about, computer science and more computer-related and remote drone operations, is going forward. But as an Air Force guys, I would say technology for the Air Force is way above everybody else. But in reality, in war and in making and keeping peace and whatever, you got to have boots on the ground. And if you don't have boots on the ground, then we have bombed nations into submission. Yes. But in the end, they went back to the way they were because you didn't have those boots on the ground. You gotta be boots. It sounds good that you can drone and bomb somebody into the Stone Age, but it's not something that's maintainable over the long. It is an opportunity for blacks. It's an opportunity for everybody in the U.S. I'll sidestep here and say there are a lot of opportunities out there in technology, everything associated with the military that we should be able to capitalize on. And it's on us as parents and grandparents to motivate our young men and women to take part and to have what we used to have down there in the King Hope, that that you can make it out of this little lull in life.
The reason why I said that, you see most of the kids today, what do you see them doing? They're on computer. Right. They're playing the computer games and all this, and I would see where that skill will come into play, with the technology today that the U.S. is using, and more.
And what I'm speaking from because I'm fortunate to have deep ties and connections and interaction with the Air Force. And the drawback of that is when you're in the war games and the computers or whatever, people die, you hit reset, you start all over again. You got all your guns, you got everything, we gotta be honest, that's what happens. And so they get a false delusion about the concept of it.
Looks glamorous when you see it.
The reality is a lot.
But to sum it up, sir, let me say this. To answer your question about technology and as it relates to the military in general, the opportunity is granted. To give you an example, I'm a Signal Corps officer. And for those of you who don't know, we are the communication branch of the army. Without us, they can't talk. When I started in Signal Corps, it was all satellites in the field. It's these rat rigs and these little, little trucks we stayed in and all this. It was mainly hands-on, pulling the lines and running the cables and all that. Well, Signal Corps evolved into pretty much automation. There's still the satellites, but there's more technology. We just have to face it as the technology is where we're headed. But as Joe's saying, regardless of how much technology, there's got to be some level Bravo, some infantry guys. Yeah. Somebody, even with the tech, somebody got to be on the ground. But yes, to answer your question, it is. That's one of the things I try to sell to my son. He's real techy. Let him know, but he still didn't catch on. He still couldn't see being a tech guy in the army.
Right. And the military is normally on the forefront of technology. That's right. The GPS systems that you see in your car today, I can remember, maybe there in Panama, the GPS system we had was almost a car. And then by the time it was over, it reached a point to where it was about as big as this desk, and then now there's probably a microchip somewhere that's in somebody that's a risk or something, you know. So, but those fields and those areas, opportunity is very good, and it's still there is opportunity out there for young folks if they want to take advantage.
Any other questions for us? I mean,
And all the places you all went mission, which one you all say most trying or most engaging, most exciting? Right?
okay, our missions well, let me go first. I'll be quick because he has so many. And let me just say, you might need to leave your email for him so he can email it to you. But look, I'll say this. As my bio said, my main job was a trainer. When soldiers left me, they went to the battlefield trained, ready, everything. Well, when I got to Fort Riley, the 1st Infantry Division, they were going to Iraq at a rate. We were sending them, and I was getting ready to go, sending them at such, the excitement, I think, was such an adrenaline rush to be during wartime. I was on at Fort Riley, but all these soldiers going, I'm getting them, and I'm getting ready, so I couldn't, you know, so eventually I didn't go because I couldn't, you know, I was on the doctor's orders at the time, but I think that mission right there in itself, working under the banner of the 1st Infantry Division and the history of the 1st Infantry Division, it go way back. That's what they do, deploy and train soldiers. So that adrenaline rush right there is one I'll never get. That's probably why I just went ahead and retired, because it was so much of an adrenaline rush, I couldn't take anymore. I think this would be a good time to get on out of here.
And the guy that asked the question is my brother.
Is that your brother? That's right.
All of the crazy stuff that he knows every location that I've been to.
That's right.
And to me, probably as you get older in the military and you get ranked and you get responsible, you know, you get to make decisions, but you also have to take responsibility sometimes for difficult and hard decisions. My nickname was Two Feathers. And when I got out, they mowed me down. They said he's just One Feathers. But you didn't want an email from me because you knew it used to say on the bottom of it, pack your bags. You know, if you get one from Joe, you're going somewhere and you're probably not going to be happy at that. Initially, it never fazed me. I mean, you start being able to, after war, you have to put things in compartments so you can deal with it. Otherwise, you know, you'll be a wreck. And so, after Joe was born, it started to make a difference. A lot of the military folks are married, and now you're telling them, hey, you got to go. Their wives and their kids, they hate it. I mean, boy, they used to look at you, boy, you know, you're the worst. And I tried to lead by example. I never wanted them to go somewhere that I wouldn't go to first. And it didn't always work out that way. And during the end, I think I had a lot of this because I was lucky. And my teams went to war and they came back. And we did stuff and we were safe. I had a pretty good track record. And then eventually, excuse my language, the shit started hitting the fan and folks started dying. And now it's no fun and it's hard to put things in a perspective. And I'll be honest, Sherry, this week, Joe and my wife will tell you, probably ain't slept. I said at VA the other day, and then the guy was talking. He said, well, I'm going to schedule you for a couple extra little beats here, Joe, because you're bringing back up stuff that you've hidden away. Not hidden away, but compartments, so you can, so you can survive. And when you were doing that, we were sitting there and we were talking about young men unfortunate young women who have died for this country. And you see them. And so for me, all of it, if I look back at it, was difficult. It was probably the hardest assignment. I just didn't have the same perspective then that I do now. Because you start to appreciate life a little bit more as you get older.
Yeah.
I would close with, we're in a time where you have politicians who, and we have a lot of feeling about anger, and we're going to take our frustration out, say maybe on the rest of the world. And I would say after my travels and seeing that a good portion of the world, they still look to us for an example. And contrary to what everybody else is, we still have to set a good example for the rest of the world. If this here thing that we do is to continue, there is no way that if he thinks he can make America great again, and he's going to go and tell some of these other countries that we're going to come here and fight, and we're great and they're not great, that's not going to happen. They're going to, folks who's been in Korea and Vietnam will tell you that the folks in that area, they're going to fight to the very last baby, period. To the very last day. You know, that mentality doesn't exist for us. We'll be the first ones that probably, and I'm going to raise a white flag. Let's look at this again. Nutrition. Their mentality is different because their lifestyle is different. Yeah. So we need to be careful when we think about it, because now we're going to have to take. And I would say that if 30% of our services is, if we go to war, we're going to have to start dragging the streets. What you say? Yeah. You go to Korea or back to the desert, they're going to start dragging the streets to find young men and women. And then with that negative effect, it'll be like Vietnam. There'll be a backlash that we can't have. So, we just have to talk to our politicians and be careful about our thought process. We still should have to put in. Well, I mean, if you had a draft like we said earlier, where everybody goes and nobody's exempt, then it seems to be better. Because in the Middle East, over at Israel, everybody serves. Men, women, everybody serves. And a lot of the foreign, if the Queen of England's kids can serve, then there ain't no kid in America that can't serve. I mean, we've just been a lot of those countries. Everybody has to serve, so they have a commitment to what we call freedom. And if you don't have that,
Well, Joe, I don't think the draft would be a bad thing. I was drafted, after college back in deferments, you had to go. I was in the service with a lot of guys that was from Detroit, Baltimore. A lot of these guys had options that, come in the military and get, whatever the crime were. And it was good for them. I know a lot of guys in the military that came out and go off in some of the tough areas. They changed their lives, but they were facing jail time and prison. So it's a good thing, I think. You have to have those good soldiers, as you say.
and there's there's an elderly guy that's a military Air Force guy, and he can relate to what I'm about to say. In the military, when you in the foxhole or you deployed or something else, there's usually no black or white. I mean, when the bullets is flying, it's everybody's taking care of everybody and hoping everybody can do their part so that you can make it. Now, when we get back to America, we might, oh no, I can't be with you, no, I can't eat with you, whatever. But at that point in time, standing in that line, at that point in time, we all the same. We all, and I believe if you ask most vets will say that, but if you notice, a lot of time they don't ask veterans what their thoughts and comments is, because they would be like myself.
Yeah.
You don't want to think about, or you don't want to know what you know, and you really don't want to. You truly just don't want to know. That's right. All right.
Thank you. We appreciate appreciate everyone coming today. Certainly appreciate our speakers and the service that they've done for our country, for us. So much of it we don't know what was done, has been done for us. But we certainly need to appreciate that. And we'll close now. And again, I appreciate everyone coming. If you have a chance, go upstairs to the exhibit and you'll see examples of others in our community who have served in the military. Thank you all.
Thank you.